Hey everyone, welcome to a new video. I hope you had a great day. Let's take a look at some new prorevenge stories.
The first story is called "Shouldn't Treat People Like This." My uncle is an Indian doctor. In the 90s, there was a massive doctors shortage in Australia, so the government gave him citizenship. Unfortunately, you still had to sit 3 expensive exams to work as a doctor in Australia. These exams cost thousands of dollars, only happened twice a year, had limited sitting spots and times, and had arbitrary fail marks. So many Indian doctors ended up becoming taxi drivers or small businessmen. My uncle decided instead he would reapply and go through Australian medical school. Sure enough, being a doctor for over 10 years makes medical school easy, and my uncle was top of his class. He decided since he was already over 40 and had a family, he would apply to become a family physician instead of applying to be a surgeon like most of his teachers had suggested. At the time, many desperate foreign doctors were applying for general practitioner residency. They would be treated the worst. They would be forced to work unpaid overtime. They would not be given proper study time or leave to sit mandatory exams. They would pocket the allowances that you were supposed to be paid by the training college. They would roster you to work every weekend shift. And if you refused, they would give you a bad review and your training would be jeopardized. This mostly happened to foreign doctors, as most of them would be in bad debt and highly desperate for any sort of work. When my uncle graduated, he applied for training in a practice that is located within an Indian ethnic enclave. Sure enough, this practice engaged in all of the above stuff. My uncle would work every single Saturday shift. During his dedicated study time, he would have to come into work. He got reprimanded for not overcharging patients in line with their framework. Worst of all, when my aunt was really sick and hospitalized and they wouldn't give him any time off to look after her and the kids. The owner of the clinic was openly racist against Indians, Asians, and Aboriginal people, who were a large percentage of the clientele of this clinic. My uncle bided his 3 years, and as soon as his documentation came through making him a general practitioner, he quit that instant. He went down to the local bank and got a loan to open up his own practice. All his old patients quickly moved with him to the new practice. The first year, he struggled, but his practice quickly became known and word spread. Surprise, surprise, foreign-trained doctors actually work well and care about their patients if you actually care about them and give them appropriate living conditions. More patients and more doctors looked to work with my uncle. Within 2 years, my uncle had a practice that had 4 doctors, 2 nurses, 2 trainees, and a manager. His practice easily rivaled his original teachers. He then started 2 more practices with the money he was pulling in. These practices trapped his old teacher's clinic in a triangle. He would advertise heavily and make sure he could take as much business from his old teacher as he could. Within 5 years, his old teacher's practice went from hiring 6 doctors, 4 nurses, and 6 trainees to just 1 doctor and no one else. His old teacher tried to sell up his practice to other doctors, but no one would purchase it, given how successful my uncle's 3 surrounding practices were. He then tried to sell it to my uncle, who refused to buy it, even at a ridiculously low sale price. Instead, he waited for the bank to repossess his old teacher's clinic and then purchased it for a bit more money from the bank. My uncle then repurposed the building into his main offices, from where he runs his other 3 practices. He made sure to redevelop his old boss's room into a staff toilet, just as one final tribute to the human turd that was his old boss. The next story is called "You Can Just Love Corporate Greed." I was working for a financial firm. It had 1,800 employees and 200 salespeople. I was one of the salesmen. We had our annual meeting in April. It was a big affair. Most of the employees attended, and the CEO gave a big speech about how the previous year was the best in the company's history. The next month, May, we each submitted memos, basically justifying why we qualified for bonuses at the end of June. I wrote mine out and explained the sales growth in my territory over the course of the previous 12 months, and what percentage my sales were out of last year's total sales. Coming off the company's best year ever, it should have been a slam dunk, right? All of us were excited about how much we'd have coming in June. June rolls around and my bonus is 0. But it's not just me, it's all over the sales floor. Less than 20% of the sales force got bonuses, and everyone was angry. All the supervisors were dealing with angry subordinates, the sales manager was too, and even the director above him. Everyone was furious and insubordinate, angry accusatory emails were flying, and the company was facing a mutiny. It got worse when it came out that the supervisors were offered bonuses that they could determine for themselves. Most of them took them, but a couple, knowing their subordinates wouldn't be getting anything, refused. My supervisor took his. When it came out, he tried to explain to his sales team how he felt it was justified and how hard he worked. He ended up with people screaming at him about how they felt the same, but they didn't get anything. So for a week or so, things on the floor came to a stop. A lot of people just didn't show up, and the ones that did were angry. I came in and started reading job offers at my desk. I also stopped selling anything or answering my phone. When confronted by my boss, I told him that as soon as I got the bonus my sales justified, I'd start working again. Until then, I'd be coming in late, reading and responding to job ads, and leaving early. He could expect me to keep that up until I found another job or was fired. The following day, I was sent to the regional sales manager's office. She said she'd heard about my work stoppage and asked me to explain myself. I told her that if she heard about it from my supervisor, then she already knew why I wasn't working and I didn't need to explain it again. She tried buddying up to me, being friendly, then being stern, then being angry. I kept my composure and told her that the longer the company held out on my bonus, the longer it was going to miss out on sales from my territory. I then gave her my average daily amount of sales from the previous year, quantified what the total loss would be for a week of me not selling, and how much cheaper it would be just to pay me the money I was owed and get me back to selling. Then I thanked her for her time and told her I'd be leaving work as soon as I left her office, and I did. The following day, I came in and checked my emails. Some of them were farewell emails from co-workers who quit over their stolen bonuses. Then I was back looking at job offers until I was told to go to the office of the national sales manager. He's the gatekeeper, he's in charge of all 200 of us. He told me he understood that I was upset and could see why. I asked him if withholding the bonuses from 80% of his sales force was his idea or someone else's. He didn't answer. He did tell me that I would be getting a check on Monday, and could I please go back to work now? I told him I'd be going back to my desk, but work wouldn't start until the check was in my hand. When I went back and checked my emails, more people left. The next day an email went out to the entire sales force. Management had taken a look at the numbers, re-evaluated the financials, and determined that June bonuses would be issued shortly. The email also apologized for the delay and reminded us that as salesmen, we were the core of the company and our hard work was appreciated. I also received another email, this time from the national sales manager, who told me while bonuses were scheduled for Monday, he'd be walking my check to my desk the following day. The following day, I showed up, sat down, and shortly afterward, the national sales manager walked on up and handed me my bonus check. I thanked him and handed him my resignation, effective immediately. In my resignation letter, I requested that a check for my unused vacation time please be cut and given to me before I left the building. When he finished reading it, I told him I'd clean out my desk while I waited for the vacation check. While I was doing that, one of my co-workers also resigned effective immediately. We were walked out at the same time and ended up having a good time at the bar across the street. I learned later from co-workers that remained that even though the company issued the bonuses, they lost about 20% of the sales force in the following 2 months. You can just love corporate greed. The last story is called A Jerk of a Neighbor. I was visiting my friend at his dad's house in an area where the land is so steep that all the driveways have to switch back up from the main road to the houses. A straight driveway is not an option because it would be steeper than the building code allows. A few doors down the road, there lived a nice old couple who, until recently, had had a vacant lot next door to them. But the lot was sold and the new owner had started construction on a new house. Unfortunately, the lot was so steep that the new owner built his driveway partly on the old couple's land. It was carved out of the hillside with an excavator. This probably wouldn't have been a big deal if the new owner had approached the old couple first and asked nicely, but he didn't. In fact, the old couple had no idea what was happening until they came home one day. They saw a huge scar in the hillside, snaking up from the road in front of their house, across the corner of their property, and winding upwards to where an excavator was working to prepare the land for their new neighbor's house. They were pretty upset, but being nice, reasonable people, they figured it was an honest mistake. So they went over to talk to the machine operator. He didn't know anything useful, but he was happy to give them the phone number of the new property owner. The old guy gave him a call and politely explained the situation, but his new neighbor, whom he'd never even met, was having none of it. He flat out denied that the driveway crossed the property line, and he was rude enough that the old guy was pretty upset. At this point, the old couple wasn't sure what to do. They double-checked the property pins to make sure they were right, and of course, they were. But after further conversations with the new owner, it was clear that he was an unreasonable guy who wasn't going to come to the negotiating table willingly. The old couple didn't want to take legal action because that would have been expensive and, frankly, the damage to their yard was already done. At the same time, they couldn't just let someone walk all over them like that, especially if they were going to be living next door for the foreseeable future. So the situation stewed for a while as construction continued on the new house. Until one day, when my friend's dad saw the old couple in the neighborhood and they started chatting. Of course, they told him the story about the new neighbor. Now, my friend's dad really likes the old couple, who don't have a mean bone in their bodies. So he was pretty mad about the situation. And when he went home, he couldn't get it out of his head. That evening, after a few beers, he had a brilliant idea. He called up the old couple, explained his plan, and asked for their permission to carry it out. They chuckled and gave him the go-ahead. So he hopped into the rusty old full-size pickup he kept as a second vehicle and drove it over to the old couple's place. He parked it across the encroaching driveway, making sure it was entirely on their property. The next morning, the work crew arrived bright and early to find that they couldn't drive to the house they were building because someone had parked a car across the driveway. They saw the note in the window with my friend's dad's phone number on it, so they called him. He explained that he had permission from the owners to park there and that, no, he would not move his truck so they could get to work. Furthermore, if anyone attempted to tow the truck, they would be charged with trespassing and theft. There was no way the construction guys were going to haul all their tools up the hill by hand, and they didn't want to get in the middle of a legal battle. So they just called the new owner to let him know they'd be taking the day off and that they'd continue to take days off until the property boundary dispute was resolved. The new owner called the old couple in a fury. But the old couple told them the same thing my friend's dad told the construction workers. The vehicle was parked on their own property, so if he had a problem with that, he could go screw himself. To make an already long story shorter, the new neighbor ranted a while. But eventually, he wanted his house to be built. So the nice old couple ended up with a significant sum of money in exchange for an easement allowing the driveway to pass across the corner of their property. And my friend's dad got several thank you cases of beer and the satisfaction that comes from putting some like this in his place.
Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.